Hi, I'm Tony Russo, and this is Funeral Service Insider from Kates-Boylston. Each episode features conversations about emerging trends and news that affect the death care industry. We talk to people who understand the delicate balance of change in a profession and vocation steeped in tradition. This week, I'm speaking with Landon Elder. He is the Director of Operations for Starmark Local, and we'll get into his business lots in this coming episode. What brought Landon to my attention was an article that he had written, or co-authored, I guess, in American Cemetery and Cremation that talked about how to use rental caskets effectively, starting with stop calling them rental caskets and start making sure you call them ceremonial caskets. Now, this is important because there was a miscommunication that I didn't hear until I was doing the editing, and so I feel like I want to clarify it before we listen to the rest of the episode. When we had originally conducted this interview, I had just finished speaking with Tony Armogida, who's the Vice President of Strategic Business Development at Global Atlantic Financial Group. And we were talking about cremation, and Mr. Armogida said that he wanted to get away from euphemisms. For example, instead of calling the minimum alternative container a minimum alternative container, calling it a cardboard box. So that way, A, families weren't surprised when they got a cardboard box, and B, families were less likely to choose a cardboard box thinking that it was going to be a minimum alternative container. Now, when I was speaking with Landon for this episode, he didn't know I was talking about cremation, and from his response, I think that he got the impression I was suggesting that rental caskets were just cardboard boxes, and he rolled with it like a champ, so there was no need to do any edits. But in listening back, I could hear that he took a mental step back before he decided whether or not I had insulted him, which I totally did not. I was talking about something else, and I hadn't informed him that I was. So that was my bad as an interviewer, but I left it in because the answer is great. So I'm almost glad that it was a combative question, even though an accidental one. So anyway, as always, please stick around after the credits at the end for the postmortem, because this week we will be talking about what it takes to rat out your dad. But here's a great conversation with Landon Elder of Starmark. So you came to my attention actually last month's, April 2024, in case people are listening in the distant future. The edition of American Cemetery and Cremation magazine. You had an article in there about reimagining the way that we think about rental caskets. And as simple as that seems, it was really a more complex thing. But before we get into that, can you tell me a little bit about, how you got to where you are now with the rental and green products, let's say in the last, several years, how you've transitioned that way?
Yeah, absolutely. So regarding the article itself, rental caskets are obviously not a new concept, right? However, when you think about them through like a green burial or green cremation lens, they can be thought of as a really green product. A little bit of background about Starmark and who we are. So Starmark itself was founded back in 2004 as a result of about 50 years of funeral industry experience. Some people might recognize the names Elder Davis or Elder Like Casket. Those were some of the inspirations for what Starmark has grown to be today. And we are one of the leading providers of funeral products in North America. So we've been privately owned and operated for 4 generations. I myself am a proud member of that 4th generation. And
I was going to say your name is Elder. You are related.
Yes,
Elder Caskets.
I am one of the elders, and very proud of that. So Starmark, we really pride ourselves on providing innovative and value, high quality products so funeral professionals can focus on the thing that matters most, right? Which is giving families the opportunity to say goodbye to their loved ones in an affordable and dignified manner. So as such, I'm circling around to your question here. We spent the greater part of the last 20 years studying funeral professionals and the end consumer of funeral products. As a result, we've surveyed tens of thousands of consumers across the nation, with our focus being on identifying the preferences and products and tendencies of families. So to answer your question, we mentioned a couple times in this article some of the recent research studies we've done. And in that, we've been able to identify just how ceremonial rental caskets are really a green solution.
And it's one of those things, and increasingly you hear things that are obvious only after you hear them, but once you hear them, you can't think of it in any other way. I spoke with a person recently for a different story who is making the argument. He puts it more gently than I will because he's better at it, that you should use the literal word cardboard box when talking to families. So A, they're not surprised, but then it gives you the opportunity to talk about what you can do besides have a cardboard box. Have you stumbled across anything like that?
Yeah, we've certainly had those conversations. We tend to use the term reinforced fiberboard because that's really what it is. Cardboard box you think of as a flimsy thing, and I do understand that side of the argument. What our intention is with a lot of products, whether it's the insert that slides into a ceremonial rental casket or some of our alternative containers, is that these are personalized units. There's tons of options and they're very affordable, so families can choose a solution that really does keep them happy. That's what our goal is. And then to be able to support funeral directors in a way that they can merchandise the products so they can still be very profitable off of every service they provide.
Right. And that's what was, again, what kind of caught my eye in the story was this notion that about how important language is and how important it is to let people feel like they're making the best choice without making them feel as if they're being too pressured or too upsold when it comes to making the lower cost decisions around what kind of container to use.
Absolutely. Yep.
So the word that you used that I really liked was ceremonial, and what was because that brings out, I think, more the idea that not only are you having a celebration in the funeral home, but also that it's not as temporary as it sounds when you call it a rental.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think, within the funeral trade, it's well known that a rental casket is a rental casket, and everybody knows what that is and the intention of what it is. Now, when you're talking to the general public, families who are grieving and everything, that term rental can not be understood fully for what it is. And so the intention with the use of promoting the word ceremonial is to, gently imply that a ceremony or a service is actually a customary part of a funeral for those who are choosing cremation. A lot of families, when they're going through their hardest time, they often think that a cremation is just a cremation and that there's no service involved and that they're never going to see their loved one again. And so the intent of using a ceremonial is a way for a funeral director to lead the conversation with this and teach and help educate families that, a celebration of life, whether it's small or big and traditional, is an accepted and, common practice with cremation.
And I'm thinking of, for example, in my own father's funeral, we understood that it was a rental, but it did feel a little bit. We knew that my father would have a heart attack if we spent a dollar more than we had to on his rental casket, but it still was you felt a little bit like you were letting him down, putting him in a rental casket. Even though it was what he wanted. When I saw ceremonial, it just made me wish I had known that word a decade ago.
Yeah, and I'm glad to hear that. And I was mentioning the education of it too. Is when you use the term rental, if I'm a family member who's grieving, I might think, well, that's disgusting, right? This means that 10 other people have used this before, father or my grandma or whoever is now using it. So that's an important point for a funeral director to make, that, for example, it's a totally sanitary thing. Everything that touches the body comes out with the insert and gets cremated. And in no way do I want this conversation to be a plug for Star Mark or any way. But with ceremonial rental caskets, there should be features in there too that are replaceable to help extend the life of that ceremonial rental casket. For something like a replaceable head panel, for example, that helps to keep the idea of the casket, sanitary, reusable, and shows the care and effort that goes into providing such a high quality service for the family.
And again, I'm sorry to help you turn this into a commercial, because it's certainly not my intent. But talking about the idea of trying to green your funeral home in a way, extending the life of these does do that. It's less stuff that you have to buy. It's less stuff that you have to eventually dispose of if you can do this kind of piecemeal refurbishment. I don't know the right way to say it. That if you can extend, as you say, I guess, extend the life that of these ceremonial caskets, not only are you buying less, which is good economically, but it is a green. If you were sitting down listing all of the green things you did, keeping your ceremonial caskets in good repair is a green method that funeral homes can use. Does that sound right?
Yeah, certainly. And I can elaborate that a little bit if you'd like. Like I said, rental caskets, they're not new. They've been around, and we all understand what their intent is. Now, when you think about them through the lens of green, you might be thinking, well, what the heck? I mean, when I think of green, I try to think of, future innovation and more developed technology and all these things. But when you really break it down, you can view it through a couple different lenses here. So first and foremost, and perhaps the most obvious point, is that the shell of the casket itself is reusable. So you're buying, like you said, less product that has to be, transported, stored, and eventually cremated, if you're talking about cremation. Another lens you can look at that through is the actual rental casket insert itself. So they should be also considered environmentally friendly options for a couple of different reasons. The first way we can look at that is just through transportation, right? So getting these items into your funeral home requires some method of distribution delivery from whoever your supplier is, right? Now, you can fit about 4 rental casket inserts in the space of one ceremonial rental casket. In addition, they are much lighter weight. They weigh about 25 pounds compared to like a solid oak 200-pound heavy burial casket. So that being said, you can fit more product on a truckload, on a container ship, whatever it may be. And you can also fit more product in your storage space at your funeral home. So that's another great way to look at it. And in addition to that, think about how both the rental casket and the rental casket insert is made up. So the rental casket, there's many things that can go into it. Obviously, there's some metal involved, but it's largely wood. Or, there's also metal ceremonial rental caskets. But when you think about the wood ones, the use of like a water-based stain is a very easy way to justify using this as a alternative. And then when you think about the rental casket insert makeup, these are made up of reinforced fiberboard for the most part. Some people use wood-based ones, and that's fine too. So those being made up of reinforced fiberboard, they burn cleaner, they burn way more efficiently. I like to think of it in terms of like a campfire. When you've got kindling or fire starter, that burns much more efficiently than like a massive log that you would put on the fire that can burn for hours and hours.
Right, less smoke.
Yeah, exactly. And then in addition to that, reinforced fiberboard is the highest recycled post-consumer content material in the world. It's fully compostable too. So if somebody ever were to wish to bury that, it could be done as well. Now, I know that's a scary thought to funeral directors, but we have had in some of our recent research studies, have had funeral directors report families that would be interested in this. So that is something to pay attention to on the horizon there.
And I'm sorry, so let me clarify that last little bit. You're seeing that there are more families that are interested in taking these caskets that are reinforced with fiberboard and using them as burial caskets.
Yeah, for like a greener option so that it would be fully biodegradable. Now, I don't want to take away from the many other really good trends that are happening in the green burial world. But this is a trend we're seeing, and we do want to pay attention to that.
Chris Kruger, Chief Executive Officer of the Foresight Companies, will present, if not now, when, at the upcoming Kates-Boylston Funeral Service Business Plan Conference, June 4th and 5th in Warwick, Rhode Island. We spoke with Chris recently about a report that was issued by the Foresight Companies in partnership with the NFDA and some of its findings, which include a lot of numbers funeral directors need to hear, particularly the statistic about how few funeral directors really know the value of their businesses.
One of the problems is that so many people in our profession don't even begin the discussion because, for fear of knowing what the outcome. That's not the challenge. The part of succession planning that we all need to be focusing more on is providing for options. And, succession planning in its purest form is about the future success and the continuity of a business. And whether that's in somebody else's hands or in the hands of family members or employees, at the end of the day, it's just about setting that business up for success. And that's what succession really is. If I get people just talking about a plan or beginning to plan, that would be the ideal outcome.
To read the rest of the story based on this interview or to register for the conference, visit Kates-Boylston.com or click the link below. One of the things that we were speaking with kind of before we got started is that in addition to these, you have also green burial options as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Green burial has been something that's been talked about recently, but it is a trend we're going to want to pay attention to. Starmark's been offering green products since its inception back in 2004. And, most recently we did come up with an addition to what we call our Nature's Way line. And that is the Brentwood Ceremonial rental casket. And that is a completely green version of any ceremonial rental casket that you can find.
And these are, so to put it crassly, these are burnable and buriable, I guess is.
Yeah, I mean, you can technically burn anything, I guess, besides.
Right.
Now, this is designed to be used as a standard ceremonial rental casket. So it does come with, inserts that are also green, fully biodegradable, no wax liners and things like that. But the casket itself could also be cremated.
I want to throw an analogy at you, and if it's the wrong analogy, feel free to say it. But I follow the electric vehicle market a little bit. Mm-hmm. And one of the questions with electric vehicles is they're very expensive and there aren't enough of them and all of those things. And Toyota, I think, has been very successful because they have this, at the risk of saying it poorly, almost like a stopgap measure, that they feel like hybrids are the way to go to be the most green to the most amount of people. I don't remember if it's Toyota or Honda, honestly. It's one of the big Japanese car companies. And when I think of the difference between, pretending that everyone is going to start having green burials immediately and trying to find ways to make cremation a greener process, this seems like the way to go as far as trying to green. I've just been writing about this. Greening cremation is a movement, and this seems like it's part of that idea that cremation can be greener without having to make a lot of changes to operation.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say that that's a fair analogy. When you talk about cost, the idea of green burial, whether or not green burial is a fad or a trend is something that we're going to have to wait and see. But I think the driving factor as to what's going to make that decision is the affordable approach to it. And I think a lot of families think of green burial as, okay, well, this is going to be my cheapest option because all I'm doing is digging a hole and putting a pine box or even just a shroud into the ground, and then I walk away and that's it. But oftentimes they find is not the case when they approach their funeral director about it. So you are right. A great option without having to change much of your operation and an affordable way to do it for both the funeral home and the family is the use of a ceremonial rental casket. And I can kind of break that down a little bit. So in one of our most recent research studies, we found this study was surveyed of funeral directors back in 2023. And we found that on average, funeral directors were paying about $2,000 for a ceremonial rental casket. And then let's combine that with a rental casket insert. And for the sake of easy math, we're going to say that that costs about $200. Most are actually cheaper than that. But again, we all like easy math here. So that's roughly $2,200 just to get a ceremonial rental casket into your funeral home and ready to use. And that may seem very expensive for a funeral director, but in the grand scheme of things, it's not actually. So that was the cost of it. So let's talk about how much we are charging to use these for a family. So the average charge to a family for the use of a ceremonial rental casket and the insert among our respondents ranged from anywhere from $500 to $2,500. And the median of that range was $1,050. So if we use that median, $1,050, and the average cost to get one into your firm is about $2,200, then we can conclude that the ceremonial rental casket pays for itself after just 2.2 uses on average. So again, if you use it 3 times through the lens of equipment alone, and I'm not denying that there's other costs associated with putting on a funeral,
right.
But when you think about it through the equipment alone, it pays for itself in under 3 uses, which is pretty remarkable to me.
Well, what was remarkable to me in your story was eventually then you can sell that casket. And I'm sorry I didn't. I put the story down because I didn't want to hurt my bandwidth, but it was something like, did you say 10? Was it 10 uses that you expected to be able to get out of a ceremonial casket before you could then sell it?
Some funeral product providers out there who are selling ceremonial rental caskets do recommend that you only use it 10 times. However, in our study, a ceremonial rental casket comes back and gets used on average about 29 times over its lifetime, which is a ton.
And that's with the refurbishments, doing the constant refurbishments as you go.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's important to ask whoever your provider is if they're providing those options that will extend the life of the casket itself. At Starmark, we have a trademark called Built to Last, and that's what we really pride ourselves on. So we provide things like I mentioned, the replaceable head panels, touch-up kits in case it gets dinged, a sturdy roller bed, adjustable bed, and a very sturdy lid support. So that way, when families go in and they try to close the lid, it doesn't break. So those are things that can extend the life of the casket. Again, on average, you can use it about 29 times. That's what we're finding over their lifetime. Now, we had a lot of our respondents say that they use theirs 41 times or more. So it's an important thing to know that these can last. And if it's just paying for itself after, under 3 uses, it's amazing how much profit a piece of equipment like this can generate for your firm. And you are absolutely right. When it's time to get a new one and you're at the end of the life of your current ceremonial rental casket, you can absolutely sell that. And again, the unit itself can be cremated, or you can use it as a burial unit as well.
The other thing that I wanted to touch on about that is doing the maintenance is important. Like when you think of the difference between using one 10 times and using one 50 times, I think you'll find that the people who can get 40 plus uses out of it are not, as they say, riding it hard and putting it away wet, making sure that it is taken care of very well in between uses.
Yeah, absolutely. And the ceremonial rental caskets should be designed in a way where maintenance is minimal. But you're right. If you're using this thing 50 times, getting dings on a door, if you're moving it into a chapel or somebody's church or whatever it is, those things do happen. So it is very important that you are showcasing the best product you have, because again, the families are really going to leave your firm happy if they're feeling like you really took care of them.
And do you? And again, this is kind of a softball question, but it's also a legitimate question. Is there a number that you like to suggest people have on hand? Like, are there 3 or 4 different kinds that you recommend, or is it something that it's easier to just do online and get the delivery quickly? How do you recommend that go?
Like the number of ceremonial rental caskets that they offer?
Yeah. In-house, like.
Yeah, I mean, to put a specific number on that would be impossible, just because every market, is totally different. Every funeral home and the way that they do things is totally different, and we absolutely respect that. I would say that providing options for families with anything is very, very important. And we've been able to see success in funeral homes that offer at least one metal, one wood ceremonial rental casket. Because again, a metal versus a wood, there's a lot of, religious preferences, cultural backgrounds, et cetera, that people really respect about having that option. The other thing too is, when you think about a metal ceremonial rental casket, that's an option for families who want to use a metal to not be required to buy a burial casket, because obviously you can't cremate a big metal casket,
Right.
but you can cremate the insert that goes into it. So it's an affordable option for families who otherwise wouldn't be able to afford a metal burial casket, still be able to do that full service and celebration of life, and then be able to do a cremation afterwards.
And I guess every funeral director has always wondered how much more price conscious people can be.
Mm-hmm.
but as being price conscious is, I guess, maybe more in the ether. Is this something that you feel like is on the rise? How are your rental caskets selling compared to, let's say, a decade ago?
I would say that the trend of ceremonial rental caskets is on the rise. Referring back to that study I was talking about, we have 80% of families are either curious or they react very positively to the idea of using a ceremonial rental casket when it gets presented to them. And I think I want to make sure I get this right, but I think it was 92% or 91% of funeral homes currently offer a ceremonial rental casket.
Very cool. And again, the additional upsell of, and it's if you're looking for a greener option, this is available to you, is something that must be appealing to families as these two trends kind of collide, for looking for something less expensive and also something that's a little bit greener.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I really respect everything that, the green burial market is doing. So I don't want to take away from that, but you're absolutely right. This is a great way to continue providing a green solution and justify it as such in an affordable way, in a way that you don't have to completely overhaul your operation.
Fantastic. And that is all I have for you, unless you have something else for me. Is there something that I should have asked and didn't, or something that you thought you'd have the opportunity to say, but I haven't provided it yet?
No, not at all. I just really appreciate your time and the opportunity to be able to share some of our thoughts with you. We at Starmark are very in tune and wanting to be supportive of funeral directors everywhere. We want to help educate the end consumer, and any way that we can do that is a great opportunity. So really appreciate your time and the opportunity to come on your podcast today.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Funeral Service Insider, the podcast, is a Kates-Boylston production. It was written and edited by me, Tony Russo. I've said it before and I will say it again. Please check out the show notes. That is where you can get in touch with us to make suggestions if there's something you want to hear a show about, if there's something that you liked or didn't like and you need me to know that you liked or didn't like it. That's the place to do it. I've mentioned this a couple of times in the past. We've started a new weekly podcast that we're calling In Case You Missed It, where we do roundups of the week's news. We do that on YouTube as well as here in your pod feed. So if you're interested in YouTube, you can follow us on YouTube as well. Link to that in the show notes too. And now for the postmortem. This week, I interviewed Chris Kruger about succession and planning succession and things like this. Something that I guess I forgot to ask him was whether or not you should try to hide financial fraud from your family before you begin the succession process. If you are a fraudster, I would say go ahead and clean everything up before you start to hand things over, because this week we read about Paul Taylor. He is a funeral director in Simcoe, Ontario, Canada, who has been committing fraud to keep his business open for longer than anyone cares to notice. He owes the government $386,000 and change in fraud that he's committed over the last 10 years, and he was turned in by his son, who I guess what else are you going to do? You either have to decide that you're going to continue to commit fraud long after your father's dead, or you have to just, drop a dime and say, hey, this business that I'm about to inherit is incredibly laced with fraud. So a link to that in the show notes as well. We'll cover that more in case you missed it for next week. But for now, I thought it was a fun story, interesting story that, the process of looking at the books, the son is like, oh my God, my dad has stolen more money than I can ever pay back. What do I do? That's it for this week. Thank you so much for listening. As always, if you like the show, also tell someone about it. That's the best way to get it to spread. We see the numbers every week and they're increasing every week. And so thank you to all old listeners. Thank you to all new listeners. And thank you to future listeners here from the past. Until next time, this has been Funeral Service Insider, the podcast.